Sometimes, when you don't know what else to do, you just keep going. Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create. I just got back from a trip home to Sierra Leone with another trip to Cape Verde slipped in between, and all I can say is that it was an amazing adventure of a trip. I'll share more about some of the nuggets because, oh my goodness, there were so many nuggets, and it's going to take me, a couple episodes to unpack it. So I'm going to save that for a later episode. And because some of the nuggets were lessons that came through taking 13 different flights in 3 weeks. Yes, people, I did that. More of that later. Early on in the trip, I ran into someone I met years ago, and we haven't seen each other in years, forever. We did, the customary squealing and hugging and, all that stuff that you do when you haven't seen someone in forever. And shockingly, she said, "Hey, I listened to your podcast." And I was floored because I haven't spoken to her in years and I did not share the podcast with her. And I was floored in a good way and re-inspired because, you see, I came into this year and into this podcast, which I started last March. I came into this podcast experience with a few goals. And one of the most important goals for me was to be consistent. All the best wisdom about podcasting says that it takes 2 years for your podcast to really start. Did you hear that? It takes 2 years for your podcast to really start making traction. And this is you plugging away. This is why so many people with podcasts start out, but they don't finish. They stop at some point really early on because they realize, oh my goodness, this is going to take forever to get any sort of traction on it. Many people are not ready for the dark, long journey of talking to themselves all alone in a room with a microphone, hoping anyone listening? So maybe for a couple of episodes, that's cute, but to do this for 2 years, for most people, they're not going to do that. So whenever I run into someone who says, "Hey, I listened to an episode," that just blows my mind and re-inspires me. Or when someone sends me a text or an email about something that they learned or that they got out of an episode, it's like getting this booster shot in my arm again. It's like remembering that what I'm creating is alive and that even when it's small and my community, small, you who's listening right now, you're still out there. So thank you so much for every one of you who've reached out to me just to simply say, "Hey, I'm listening," because it means the world to me and it helps me to be what I'm going to talk about today, which is consistent and consistency, because I know you're there and I want to show up for you consistently the same way that you are for me. So that's what we're going to get into today. Consistency, why it's so important for you on your creating journey and why it's so much more powerful and rewarding than intensity. Because we are in the final weeks of the year and you know what's coming up. A new year. Yay! And all the freshness and hope and maybe even anxiety and fear that can bring along. And I want to share this so that I can inspire you with the lessons that I've gained from taking on this challenge to be consistent with what I create, which is this podcast. And also I want to share some secret nuggets of how I've been able to do it. It hasn't just been through sheer grit and willpower. I've had a lot of help and support along the way, and you'll find that you're going to need it too. So first, let's talk why. Let's talk why being consistent is so important in creating and even in life in general. Well, you don't have to go far in your life to find the answer to this, I'm sure. Think about first the opposite. Think about inconsistency and its impact on you and your life and maybe on other people. Think about a business that is inconsistent with the customer experience it produces for you. Or think about if you lived and tried to work and build an ice cream shop of some sort in a country that had an inconsistent power supply. What would that do to your business? What would that do to your relationship with your customers, right? It would be destabilizing, right? Or think about someone who is important to you or who you want to be important to you, but they are inconsistent in how and when they show up. It's rough, right? Inconsistency means you can't do two very important things. One, you can't make progress with, and you can't rely on the thing or the person that's inconsistent. You can't make progress and you can't rely on them. There is no solid foundation and there is no launching pad for forward momentum. This means you end up feeling stuck when it comes to that thing and maybe unsafe and not trusting. But consistency gives you all the goodies that are the opposite. You can make progress, you can build, you can trust, you can grow, you can bloom. Beautiful, right? And these are all the things you want as a creating maven. You want whatever you're creating to bloom and grow forever. If you get it, you get it. Okay, I couldn't resist. But seriously, creating is not about being big and flashy. It's not about intensity and quickly having some giant edifice of a thing that everyone comes to, ooh and ah about. It's about you. It's about you becoming a certain type of person. And becoming is a character thing. And character things are always about what you do consistently, not sporadically with some intensity. So it's important you build consistency into yourself, into your creating, into your whole life. But important things are not always the easiest things to do and stick with. It's hard to be consistent when you've lost the desire or reason why. It's hard to be consistent when it feels like your whole life is conspiring against you to make it the toughest thing in the world to do. Consistency can feel like a slog because we all just sometimes feel stuck, sad, and hopeless, or lose our way and lose hope in some way. If this is you after you've started, or if you're having a hard time starting with your creating anyway, what do? It's getting to the end of 1 year. We're about to go into another year. How can things be different? This is what I've learned. As I said, I've had a lot of help along the way, and that's one of the most important lessons I've learned about what it takes to be consistent. But before I get to that, I want to talk about the first and most important thing, committing. In episode 49, I talked about commitment and how you often have to commit first and know how later. Consistency is the how that follows the courageous act of committing. This is step one, though, committing. Just saying you're going to do it. Just putting your first foot in it, so to speak. Everything that is consistently done starts with a first step, obviously, and that is the move of a person who has committed first. This is what you need to do first with anything in your life, but especially with what you're going to create in the new year. Just commit. Just tell yourself and another person that you're going to do it. You're going to commit. We're going to figure out how, or I've already figured out how for you. It's about finding some way and measure of being consistent, and we'll talk about that. But you have to commit first. If you're going to be consistent, you have to start somewhere. So that's the first step. And then the second step is thinking about how you can break this into small bite sizes. Turtle steps, to be exact. I've talked about this so many times. It's not about going big or going home. That is the fastest way to get yourself discouraged early on, especially when you stumble along the way, which we all do. So how I did this for myself, my bite-sized turtle step with the thing that I create, which is this podcast, is that right from the beginning, yes, I committed to it, but I also knew that I had to pace myself. And this had to be something that was not happening every single week. I just knew that I was not going to be able to keep up the intensity of that pace if it was going to have to be a weekly podcast. So I said, this is going to be something that I do every other week. I'm going to chunk it down into that smaller, manageable bite-size piece for me. I'm going to have more time. And I also did not commit to a specific length of an episode. So you'll see that some of my episodes are longer, some of them are shorter, some of the longer ones are the interview ones. But I've created that small turtle step commitment, which is just put something out every other week. It doesn't have to be a certain length, doesn't matter how long or short it is, but just consistently show up for your listener. So that commitment to being small and visible in some way, that turtle step commitment is that next important step, going small. So your first step is just committing, and then your second step is going small. And then third is knowing that you can't go it alone, getting accountability, getting help, getting support. I did this right from the beginning of my creating journey. I have a podcast coach and an editor who works with me and is with me on this and has been with me on this entire journey. And I also have an accountability partner. And between the two of them, I always have someone who knows that I'm working on an episode. There's an episode that's coming up. I have different ideas, and they know when it's supposed to launch. And they know that this is a commitment that I've made. And it's just been so important for even those moments when it's been toughest and hardest, or when I didn't have an idea what I was going to talk about, what I was going to share. Just knowing that these two people know that it's supposed to happen, and I'm in constant conversation with them about it, was my accountability. And of course, hearing from you guys, whenever I hear from you guys, if you guys send me an email or reviews, that was also its own form of accountability as well. Hearing from people who are listening is a reminder that like, hey, what you're creating is having an impact. Hey, what you're creating, there are people who are enjoying it and experiencing it. And that was so important, because imagine if I never heard from a single person who was listening, or if I didn't have accountability partners in my podcast coach, editor, and my accountability partner, it would be so easy on those tough days for me to just be like, whatever, I'm going to skip this time, or, I'll get back to it. But having those external accountability and reinforcements have been so powerful and critical to me being consistent. And so this is it. You need these three things. If you haven't set this up for yourself so far this year, maybe these are the things that were missing that made it hard for you to be consistent. But that shouldn't stop you. And you have plenty of time to get prepared for this for the new year. Because that first thing you're going to do is just commit. Commit in the new year that you are going to create, and you're going to create consistently. And then to make that easier for you, you're going to break up your creating project, whatever it is, into bite-sized pieces and steps. You're going to be about doing small turtle steps consistently, doing it being small, having forward momentum, and getting away from this idea that you need to be intense or be big about it. And then third, you need to identify one or two people who are going to know that this is your commitment and the intensity or lack of intensity of your commitment, like how often you want to be creating, so that they can be your accountability partners, so that they can check in, so that you can report into them, so that there can be this united team that you have that's helping you move forward. Because there's so much to gain and so much to learn from doing this. So much to gain and so much to learn from being consistent in what you create and what you're offering. I've learned so much from this year of continuing to create. Consistency truly does beat intensity, because if I was trying to be intense, I would not have made it to episode 50 of this podcast, of consistently creating, of consistently using my gifts and offering my talents and service. Taking up a challenge to be consistent will test you and test things in you that you didn't know needed testing. Like I had no idea, but it will be worth it. You'll learn how compassionate and graceful you really are in the face of seeming failure to yourself. And you'll learn how to be more compassionate and more graceful. You'll learn how much perfection is or isn't an unrelenting standard in your life. And if you find that it's got this vice grip around your neck, it's so important to know this and learn to loosen that grip. You'll learn just how much you need people, your people, the ones who are for you, the ones who will show you how to be compassionate and gracious when you're not. You'll also learn the ones who know how to give you the perfectly aimed and timed kick in the caboose so that you can get on with it, and they'll do it with a smile. The valley is part of life, and there are going to be valleys in this journey of being consistent and in creating consistently. For someone who always has a plan, this is a very necessary and humbling thing to learn. It's a reminder that you as a person don't get your value from achievement, even if the achievement is creating. I want so much for you to have the gift of knowing that you've spent time consistently creating and that you've done it because that's what you committed to do, and that you've done it in community and in collaboration with your accountability partners. It's such a joy, such a gift, and such a delight. The world needs the things that you were born to create. The world needs those things that you're thinking about and that you haven't yet gotten around to creating. We need it. And maybe we missed out on it this year, or maybe we got a little taste and a bite of it, but we want and have the opportunity to have more of it in the new year. So I hope you'll take to heart what I've shared. I hope you'll commit. I hope you'll commit to small bite-sized chunks of what you're going to create. And I hope you'll support yourself by bringing a set of accountability partners around for you. And if you're looking for someone to be an accountability partner, if you're looking for someone else to just know that you're committed, send me an email at joy@reframetocreate.com and share that you've made a commitment to creating in the new year and what that commitment is and how you're going to break it down in a bite-sized piece. I want to hear it. I want to be as much of a support to you as you have been for me this year. Creating isn't easy, but it's always worth it, and it's always important because that's who we are. That's what we're born to do. And I love reminding you about this, and I cannot wait for what you're going to create in the new year. See you soon, Creating Maven. Until then, remember to always ask yourself, what will I create?